You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. Why did I start cheating on Jeff? I was bored. I was lonely. I needed a little excitement in my life. Maybe it was just because I could. Jeff was away more than 14 hours a day, returning home between 7:30 and 8. I worked until 4:30. This gave me enough time to do whatever I wanted. Jim was so flirty and very handsome. Over time, working together, we became closer. We trusted each other when we should have trusted our spouses. One afternoon, after some serious flirting, Jim kissed me. We quickly parted ways. We pulled away. Both were embarrassed, smiled, and then began to laugh nervously. I was confused too. I liked the kiss, but I knew it was wrong. After all, I was a married woman. We continued to lay out the materials when Jim approached me again. "Lauren, that kiss was something special. I want to kiss you again," he told me, looking into my eyes. He kissed me again. We made love. It was his mischief that made him special. That's what was missing in my life, a feeling of excitement. I was no longer bored. Now I look forward to every day and the opportunity to be with Jim. Looking back now, I think Jim and I would agree that it was one huge mistake. I fooled myself into thinking I didn't love Jeff as much as I should. I'm reminded of the old saying, "You don't know what you have until you lose it." It was all Jim's idea, a stupid trip to Florida. I should have known better. Jeff has been acting strange lately. He was somehow cold and aloof. I called Jim and told him that we would have to back off and cool it down for a while. Then he came up with this stupid idea to take me on a business trip to Florida. It really sounded exciting to go to South Beach on the arm of a big, handsome man. I don't know how he managed it, but he persuaded our manager to include me on the trip. It's hard for me to remember the exact words that were said. Jeff may remember it differently, but that's how I remember it. I remember the night I told Jeff. He entered through the front door. He threw his briefcase on the table and remarked, "It was a hard day." "I'm glad to see you're in a good mood," I replied. "I am happy, and I hope that you will be happy too after I tell you my good news." I beamed. "My day wasn't that great. You speak first." "Okay," I giggled. "I was asked to go to South Beach for a seminar on the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program. This is an all-expenses-paid stay at the Victor Hotel, one of the old Art Deco hotels on Ocean Avenue in the heart of South Beach. The bad news is that I won't be here from Friday this week to Saturday next week. I'll be gone for 9 days, honey. Do you mind if I go?" He didn't seem happy, sad, angry, or even surprised by the news. This should have been another hint that not everything was as it seemed. I thought he would be upset. I thought he would object that he didn't want me to go there without him. I looked into his eyes to understand how he felt. His eyes were fixed on mine, and he asked without any emotion, "Is it important for your work to go on this trip?" I told him, "Perhaps I will be passed over for a future promotion if I am unable to travel." He stood up and walked to the front door, looking at the front lawn for a few moments. Then he almost whispered something that I could barely understand. I thought he said everything was fine. I asked him, "Did you just say that I can go?" Still standing in the doorway and looking out, he nodded his head affirmatively. He never looked at me. He nodded his head. Yes, I could go. I felt so relieved. I was sure that if he looked at me, he could see the lie on my face. Now I was sure that he knew nothing about my affair with Jim. Jeff would never have let me leave if he did, right? I felt dizzy like a schoolgirl. I walked up to Jeff and hugged him, saying, "You won't regret this." When he didn't answer, I ran to the phone. I should have told Jim. "Jim, Jeff said I could go to Florida with you." I laughed and giggled the whole time I was talking to Jim. One day I finally looked at Jeff. He stood at the table watching and listening to the telephone conversation. When I looked in his direction, he turned and walked out the door. He still had the same blank look on his face. Where the hell was my head? After the phone call, we spent a quiet evening at home. Jeff sat alone, staring out the window, lost in his own thoughts. It finally dawned on me that he didn't want me to go on this trip. However, he wouldn't stand in my way if it meant promotion. That's exactly what I thought. If only I knew his plan. I had to do this. It was so unlike Jeff to agree so easily to my request to leave without him. This should have raised warning signs. In my eagerness to spend time with Jim, I didn't heed the warnings. Jim wanted to take me to the airport, but Jeff wouldn't hear of it. He insisted and took time off from work to take me to the airport. The trip passed in silence. Jeff was acting funny. I felt that something was wrong and asked him, "Jeff, are you upset? Do you mind if I go on this trip?" He replied that he would be lonely and miss me while I was gone. I assured him that this would be a work trip with no time for rest. At the airport, Jim came up to me, kissed me hello in front of Jeff, and made some stupid comment about how he would take care of me on the trip. I thought Jim had ruined everything when Jeff glared at Jim. I quickly assured Jeff that Jim meant that he wouldn't let anything bad happen to me. Jeff turned to me and said, "I know what he means, Lauren." I breathed a sigh of relief when he turned back to Jim and said, "Thank you for looking after her." Jim convinced us to go through security. He passed first. Just as I was about to give my boarding pass and driver's license to the TSA agent, Jeff pulled me back. "Are you leaving and haven't said goodbye to your husband?" he asked. I hugged Jeff and kissed him, answering, "Of course, how imprudent of me." He pulled me close and said, "I need to talk to you before you leave. We have never been apart for so long before. I want you to know that I have loved you since I was 16 years old. You're leaving on a plane, and I'll go home alone. Anything can happen to us. If for some reason you never see me again, I want you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I love you more every day. If anything happens to you, I won't be able to continue living." He kissed and hugged me again, saying, "I love you. Have a safe trip and return to my home safe and sound." I politely replied, "I love you too, honey. But I have to go." As I turned to leave, Jeff pulled me back. "Lauren, I know I told you it was okay, that you could leave. I meant it when I said it. Now that you're leaving, I realize that I don't want you to leave. It's not too late. Tell him you can't go and come home with me. Blame it all on me. What do you think? Jeff, you know I can't give up on Mr. Beckman at this late date. Tickets purchased and paid for. Besides, he needs me at this seminar. I know I'm being selfish, but I don't want you to leave." I was angry. Now, at the last possible second, he was telling me that he didn't want me to leave. I didn't even think for a moment about his feelings. I told him, "Jeff, I need to go. Don't try to stop me. My decision is made. I'm going on this journey. I will be a great help to Jim. I can't let him down." I looked into his eyes. He looked so unhappy. He really looked sad, like he was about to lose his best friend. To be honest, I thought he was going to cry. For a moment, I almost told him I wasn't going. Then I thought, no, I want to spend this time with Jim. I turned away, handing my boarding pass and license to the agent. She obviously heard what Jeff told me. When she looked at my license, she said, "It seems he really loves you." I glanced quickly at Jim and replied, "I think so." When I turned to pick up my license and boarding pass, she looked at me with sad eyes and said, "He doesn't know, does he?" "What?" I answered with obvious irritation. "What are you talking about?" "You'll break his heart when he finds out." I told her, "You have no idea what you're talking about." I extended my hand and took the ticket and license from her hands. I started to turn to leave when she grabbed my hand, pulled me towards her and whispered, "When he finds out, it will break your heart too." She continued to whisper, letting go of my hand, "Aren't you ashamed, girl? The one behind you loves you, and the big one over there will break your heart." I walked across the roped-off area where Jeff and Jim were waiting for me. Jeff noticed that my face was flushed and looked at me questioningly. Jeff was always sensitive to my emotions and knew something was wrong. I waved him away with my gaze. Jim never suspected anything was wrong. If I were thinking sensibly, I should have known which man was best for me. I also should have known that Jeff could read my feelings and would have known something was going on. Jeff stayed to watch us get through security. I looked back at him one day as I was putting my shoes in one of the gray plastic containers. After going through the body scanner, I turned around to wave goodbye to Jeff, but he was nowhere to be seen. It seemed strange to me, but I just put it out of my head. The flight was pleasant, but lonely. Jim fell asleep immediately, leaving me to watch TV on the flight until we landed. We checked into our room, and without waiting to put our clothes away, we jumped into the shower and then made love. After we laid out our clothes, I decided to call Jeff at our home number early to let him know I had arrived safely. Strange, but no one answered. Remembering what Jeff said about us not seeing each other again, I suddenly became worried. I called several more times, but still no one answered. I was really worried. Finally, around 8 o'clock, my cell phone rang. I realized it was from Jeff. "Hello, honey. I'm glad you called. I called your home several times, but you didn't answer the calls. I was worried about you. Where have you been?" I asked. "I went to one of the local bars with the guys from work. They were raving about some club and persuaded me to go. That's all," Jeff replied. Not believing my eyes, I experienced a fit of jealousy. Now I realize that I thought if I was cheating, then maybe he was cheating too. "You better not hit on any girls, Jeff. Remember that you are a married man. I don't think I could forgive you if you did that." "Why do you think that I would cheat on you? Have I ever given you any reason to suspect me of betraying you or our marriage? You know me better than anyone. I could never hurt you by doing something as dirty as this. I know you would never do something like that to me, Lauren. That's why I let you go on this trip to Florida. I trust you completely. I trust you with my heart, even my life. You know it. You understand, don't you?" he asked. "Of course, honey. I feel the same way too." I lied. I don't know why I said that. "I know you won't do anything like that to me," I muttered, stammering. "Look, Jeff, I'm really tired from the plane ride, and I think it's making me bitchy. You call tomorrow and I'll be in a better mood, okay?" "Of course, Lauren, we can talk tomorrow," he replied. "Good night, Jeff. I love you." I needed to tell him that I love him. I do not know why. I felt like I was slipping away from him. I really didn't want to lose him. I just wanted this adventure for myself. "Good night, Lauren," he said, hanging up. A thought struck me. Did he really say that he loves me back? I wasn't sure. I thought he must have done just that. He used to always do this when we talked. I must have missed it. After Jeff's phone call, Jim and I made love again. This was supposed to be a real vacation. After breakfast on Saturday morning, we decided to go to the pool and get some sun. I bought 2 special outfits for this trip and decided to wear the more conservative one today. It was a red bikini with a very revealing top. The bottom was nothing more than a large thong. I knew Jim would love it. I walked up to the pool ahead of Jim. I really impressed him. I liked this idea. We sat on 2 sun loungers and enjoyed the warmth of the sun. Jim sat down and started talking to me about the seminars we would be doing starting Tuesday morning. Without any warning, he leaned over and kissed me. We exchanged a few more kisses. I asked Jim if he wanted to come back to the room. His face lit up with a big smile, and he helped me get up and gather our things. We left holding hands like a couple in love. After dinner, we returned to our room to wait for the expected phone call from Jeff. But that evening, there was no one. For some reason, I was angry that he didn't call. Poor Jim. I was in such a foul mood that he wouldn't get any love tonight. On Sunday, we got up early. Jim and I wanted to take a walk along the boardwalk at Lummis Park. We were hoping to see some movie stars frolicking on the beach. Unfortunately, we didn't see anyone. As we were leaving the park, located directly across the street from the hotel, my cell phone rang. I looked at the phone and saw that it was Jeff. I was still angry at him for not calling last night. Jim asked me who it was, and I answered with a laugh. "That idiot." Jim also laughed at my little joke. I have to answer the phone. Something bad could have happened. Why else would he call on Sunday morning? "Jeff, is everything okay?" "Did something happen?" I asked. "It's okay, honey. I was lonely and I just wanted to hear your voice. It's good to know that you care about me. I worry about you all the time, Jeff. It's Sunday morning and I thought something bad might have happened. You didn't call last night. You scared the crap out of me. I practically screamed at him. I was very annoyed. I didn't know I would be like this, bothered to you, Lauren. I knew he was in pain. I heard it in his voice. I felt lonely. I thought talking to my wife would lift my spirits. Sorry to bother you. Before I could answer, he hung up. Don't worry, I said into the switched-off phone. I turned off the phone and walked to the nearest bench. What did he want? Asked Jim. He was lonely and wanted to talk to me. Why did I attack him like that? It was a question I asked myself, not Jim. But he answered anyway. Lauren, we've been having this affair for 6 months now. Maybe you're starting to get tired of him. Maybe it's time to let him go, get a divorce. Then we could spend more time together. We won't have to hide anymore. That's right, I snapped. Your wife won't mind if we go to your house for a matinee, will she? Yeah, it's like we don't have to hide anymore. I grinned at what I said next. Jim, you make $38,000 a year. You have no prospects of achieving more. Since Jeff's last promotion, with his year-end bonus, he makes almost $200,000 a year. I like you, Jim, but you're not that good. Jeff is pretty good at this. So I really won't be missing out on too much. But someday he will become the CEO of this bank, and I intend to be there to share it with him. So there will be no divorce. Get that idea out of your head. Besides, you will never divorce Jane. You will never leave your 2 children either. So stop pestering me about the divorce. You're right. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy each other's company while we're here, right? Jim suggested. That's right, I beamed. Taking him by the hand, we ran across the street to our room. Jim and I took a short nap after making love. We woke up, had a quick snack, and decided to head back to the pool. I told Jim, I picked out a special outfit to go to the pool today. I hope you enjoy it. I was wearing a tangerine cape, but Jim wanted to immediately see the whole outfit. I refused, telling him, you will see this in the pool. I walked towards the pool with Jim walking right behind me. Jim sat down, and I remained standing with my back to him. I turned around and took off the covers. I laughed and asked, do you like it? I like it, Jim replied. At that moment, one of the hotel employees came up to us and said, Miss, some guests complained that you were showing nudity by the pool. Such demonstrations are prohibited on hotel premises. I have to insist that you cover yourself. Confused, I looked back at the parents of 2 small children who were staring at us. I grabbed my cape and put it on. We left the pool area. Returning to the room, we tore off our clothes and jumped into bed. When I woke up later, I saw Jim on the balcony wearing one of the thick terry robes the hotel provides to its guests. We made love. When the phone rang, I realized it must be Jeff and told Jim to be quiet while I talked to him. I picked up the phone after the 5th ring. Hello, Jeff. Lauren, Jeff asked with concern in his voice. Are you okay? Your voice is strange. It took you a long time to pick up the phone and you seemed out of breath. Thinking quickly, I answered, I was in the shower when I heard the phone ring. I grabbed a towel and ran to answer the call. You should have seen me sitting naked on the bed. I think you'd have some naughty ideas. I'm sure I would, baby. I'm calling to see how your day was. Did you have a productive time at the seminar? Oh, that was all I could squeeze out. I was very surprised. Yes, Jeff, we had a good day at the seminar, I continued. How was your day, honey? I feel depressed, and I feel a little sorry for myself. I miss your sweet voice. I miss hugging you and being kissed back. What I miss most is you lying next to me in bed at night. This bed gets big and lonely when you're not here to share it with someone. I don't have to tell you this. You feel the same way. You know what it's like to wake up alone in the morning. That's all I heard when Jim distracted me. I removed the phone from my face, tried to cover the receiver, and pushed him away. He moved away and I told him again, shut up. I raised the phone to my ear again, answering Jeff. That's right, honey, that's right. I lied. Listen, Jeff, I'm freezing here. I'm all wet. And now I need to go. I will talk to you tomorrow. Fine? I love you, I told him, as I always did at the end of a conversation. Right, he muttered sarcastically. Goodbye, Lauren. He hung up. I actually looked at the phone before putting it down. I sat on the bed, pulled my knees to my chest, and wrapped my arms around my legs. I had a bad feeling about this phone call. Something was wrong. I couldn't understand what was going on. Damn, Jim, something happened when he distracted me. I ignored it. I was tempted to call Jeff back when Jim interrupted my thoughts. "What's going on with you, Lauren?" asked Jim. "You look like you just lost your best friend." "Maybe so." Something was wrong with that phone call from Jeff. I have a really bad feeling. I hope he doesn't know about us. This was the second time I told him I loved him, and he didn't say the same back. He had never done this before. He always tells me he loves me when we hang up. The first time was on Friday. It seemed to me that he said this, but I didn't hear it. Tonight I know he didn't say it on purpose. Maybe he also said this on Friday, not on purpose. If it were true, it would mean that he knows about us. He should have known before he allowed you to go on this journey. You yourself said that if he had known, he would never have let you go with me. Logic tells us that he knows nothing. You're probably right, Jim, I thought. Jim was right. Jeff had no way of knowing about this. And yet, deep down, I had an unpleasant feeling. Jim still wanted to make love. On Tuesday morning, Jim and I got up early and finished the first day of our workshops. When we returned that evening, we were both too tired to engage in any lovemaking. Jim actually fell asleep early while I was waiting for Jeff to call. By 10 o'clock, I was furious with him for not calling again. By 11 o'clock, fear had crept into my mind again. Did he know about this and didn't he call on purpose? Should I call him? No, it was already too late. I thought about what Jim said yesterday and had to agree that Jeff didn't know anything. If I really believed this, then why did it take me so long to fall asleep that night? Wednesday was the same as Tuesday. We both headed back to the hotel room and ordered dinner. After eating and a quick shower, Jim felt refreshed and began to pester. I was shattered. I couldn't think of anything, other than waiting for Jeff's phony call. When this didn't happen, I was horrified. There was no chance that he wouldn't call 2 nights in a row. Even Jim began to worry. Jim's wife called him every day. Now he was beginning to doubt. When I didn't get a call by 9 o'clock on Thursday, I called my mom and explained to her that I hadn't heard from Jeff since Monday and could she go home and check on Jeff? My mother said that, of course, she would go straight there. 30 minutes later, my cell phone rang, and it was a call from our home phone. I picked up the phone, blurting out, "Jeff, I'm so glad you finally called. Are you okay?" "It's me, Lauren," Mom answered. "Jeff isn't here." I looked around all the rooms in the house. In none of them does he lie unconscious. All his clothes are in his closets, and his computer is in his office. "Could you tell me what's going on?" "Nothing is happening, Mom." I lied. "We had a little argument on the phone, and I think Jeff is mad at me. I'm sure everything will be fine when I finally talk to him. I'm relieved to know he's not lying unconscious in one of the rooms like you said. If you hear anything from him, please ask him to call me." "I'll ask Lauren. This is so unlike him. You must have said or done something really bad if he didn't call you for 3 days." "No, Mom. Nothing that bad. Just ask him to call if you see him. Thank you for doing this for me. See you when I get home." While Mom, "Well, okay, honey, I miss you and can't wait to see you on Saturday. Good night, Lauren." After my mom's phone call, I became even more worried. Where the hell could he be? Why wasn't he home? I realized that I would have to wait 2 more days to find out unless he called or I could contact him. I decided to call myself, to his home number and to his cell phone. I have voicemail on both lines. I left pleading messages on both lines, telling him how much I missed him and couldn't wait to talk to him. I also said that if he is angry with me for any reason, we could deal with it when I get home and please not do anything rash. I was beginning to believe that my marriage might be over. Friday seemed to drag on forever. I was not surprised that no one called that evening. I actually called my home phone and Jeff's cell phone, but couldn't get through. Needless to say, sullen Jim didn't get anything that night either. On Saturday morning, I got up early. I had my things packed and dressed before Jim got up. It was about 11 o'clock when we left the room to check out. As the elevator doors opened into the lobby, I looked at the front desk and saw the clerk pick up his phone and make a phone call. He spoke for a few seconds and hung up as we approached the front desk. Jim gave the clerk our key cards and his credit card. The badge on the clerk's shirt indicated his name was Carlos. Carlos returned Jim's credit card and made him sign some papers. What he said next made my brain turn to mush. He ambushed us by saying, "Mr. Beckman, Mrs. Carlson, I hope you enjoyed your stay here at the Victor Hotel, and I hope to see you again soon." When I heard him say my real name, my mind went blank. All I could do was look back at him and say, "What did you call me?" "You are Mrs. Carlson, aren't you?" he asked, with a sly smile. My smart answer was, "Why do you think that?" He put 2 photographs on the counter in front of us. One was a photograph of Jim sitting in a hotel restaurant. The other was of me, apparently taken the day I tried to sunbathe topless by the pool. My bare breasts were clearly visible in the photograph. Carlos went on to explain how he got these photos. "Some man checked me and asked if I knew the people in the photographs. I told him yes. I told him that you are registered as the Beckmans. You are well known here after showing off your naked charms last Monday. This person kept telling me that I was wrong. He said the man in the photo is actually Jim Beckman, but the woman with him is not Jim's wife, but his wife, Lauren Carlson." "He was here? Jeff was here. When did he get here?" I asked. Carlos gave me another look that I couldn't understand. "Let me take a look." Carlos typed into his computer and told me, "A certain Mr. Jeff Carlson checked in last Friday at 4 o'clock and checked out on Tuesday at noon." "Oh my God, Jim, he's been here all weekend," I exclaimed. Carlos turned to me and asked, "You are Mrs. Carlson, aren't you?" "Yes, that's true," I admitted ashamedly. "Okay, in that case, I have something for you." Carlos smiled the same mysterious smile, handing me an envelope. I looked at him. It was not addressed to anyone. I opened the envelope and took out a folded piece of paper. I opened it and read the 3 words printed on it. "Lauren, sorry. Half-Duke." I felt like I was about to faint and leaned against Jim for support. After he helped me calm down, he took the paper from my hands and read it. I saw a worried expression appear on his face as he whispered to me, "Come on, Lauren, get out of here." Before we could leave, Carlos called out to Jim, "I have an envelope for you too, Mr. Beckman." He held out his hand with an envelope. Jim looked at him for a long time. I know he didn't want to touch it. Finally, Jim took it, pulled out the paper inside, and read it. Jim read it and turned to look out the window overlooking Ocean Avenue and dropped the paper almost absent-mindedly to the floor. I took the piece of paper and read it. "You thought you'd get off free, idiot? I spent the last 2 hours with your wife this morning. I don't think you'll get the homecoming you were hoping for. I showed her all my evidence. This is just the beginning. I will do everything in my power to make your life a living hell." Jim was still looking out the window. I took 2 photographs and letters for Jim and me. As I was putting them in my purse, I saw Carlos pick up the phone and say, "Did you hear that?" I stared at him, and he continued, "Was this everything you expected?" "That's good, sir. I hope to see you again in Victor. You have made your stay here most interesting. And the same to you, sir. Goodbye." "Was it my husband?" I asked. Carlos gave me that same smile again, but didn't say anything. I told Jim, "Come on, we need to catch a plane." On the way to the airport, I called my mother. I asked her to meet us at Kennedy Airport. My mother, puzzled, asked, "Won't Jeff pick you up?" "I don't know, Mom. We actually had a fight, and I know he's really upset with me right now. I can't believe it's like that, honey. Jeff would never leave you in trouble." "Lauren," my mother said, now with suspicion in her voice, "what exactly were you fighting about?" "Nothing, Mom. You have nothing to worry about. This is bullshit. It must have been something serious if he didn't pick you up, plus a trip to your house to see where he was on Thursday night. No phone calls. It had to be something big." Then, with horror in her voice and perhaps some awareness of what might have happened, she asked loudly, "Oh my God, Lauren, what have you done?" I started sobbing. "I didn't do anything that couldn't be fixed. Mom, Please come to the airport in case Jeff doesn't show up. If you did what I think you did, he won't be there. Don't worry, I'll pick you up." Then she hung up. I don't remember much about the taxi ride to the airport or going through security and boarding the plane. It was as if my mind had simply switched off and I was on autopilot. I didn't have any clear thoughts until we were airborne. Once my mind started working again, I pulled out pictures of Jim and me. This was obvious when my photo was taken. Jeff should have seen what happened between me and Jim on Monday. Then I looked closely at Jim's photo. He was sitting in a booth and wearing a black shirt. The only time he wore this shirt was on a Monday night at the hotel restaurant. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The guy wearing a Mets cap and holding a camera must have been Jeff. If he had seen everything we did on Monday, I would have realized that divorce might be in my future. There was something else that bothered me. In Jeff's letter to me, he called himself a nerd. I only called him moron once. That's when I answered his phone call on Sunday. He must have connected us to the sound somehow. I shuddered to think what he would do if he heard our entire conversation. I could only hope that he would pick me up at Kennedy Airport to take me home. I thought the chances of this happening were slim. Jim was sitting on the seat next to the window. Every time I looked at him, he was looking out the window. But I knew he wasn't really seeing anything. I spent most of the flight home looking at letters and photographs. I kept replaying in my mind the phone calls I'd received from Jeff. If Jeff was in Miami, who knows what he saw or heard? This ignorance terrified me. The most disturbing thing was the last phone call. That night I realized that something was wrong. Something was wrong with this call. His attitude was strange and I missed something. Now I felt that it was very important, and Jim distracting me made me regret it. After replaying all the events in my head, I realized that I couldn't do anything until I saw Jeff again. When the flight landed, I couldn't wait to get off the plane. I ran through the terminal until I left the security area. If Jeff was going to pick me up, I had to see him there. There is a small ramp that leads to the lobby where Jeff should be waiting. As I stepped off the ramp, I quickly said a prayer. I saw that my mother was waiting for me. I asked, "Is Jeff here?" Mom shook her head from left to right and said, "No." Jim followed right behind me, looked around, and didn't see Jane. He looked dejected. He quickly took out his phone and called his wife, Jane. "It's me. Will you pick me up?" he asked. He listened for a while and then ended the call. He looked at us and said, "She hung up. She won't come." He walked up to the bench and covered his face with his hands. I was sure he was crying. Mom walked up to Jim, pulled him by the hand and told me, "Come on, I'll take you both home." On the way to my house, my mother continued to cast withering glances at me. One day I turned to look at Jim. He looked out the window and tears streamed down his face. Like me, I thought. He thought this trip was a stupid idea. Definitely not worth it. When I arrived home, I didn't know if Jeff would be there. I asked Jim to wait in the car. Confrontation would not be good at this stage, if at all. I ran into the house shouting, "I'm home, Jeff." There was no answer. "Jeff, are you here?" I called him again. Silence. I ran through the house looking for Jeff. I walked into our bedroom and found his closet and chest of drawers empty. In a panic, I ran past my mother standing at the dinner table, heading straight to Jeff's office. When I looked into the room, I realized that I was in trouble. The office was empty. Realizing that he had left, I walked into the living room and sat down heavily on a chair. It only took a few moments for the fact that he had 4 days to make plans to sink in. Removing his clothing and personal belongings may be just the beginning. What else has he done? Finally, I turned and looked at my mother. She stood at the dining table with an envelope in her hand. Mom handed me the papers. The sign, in Jeff's handwriting, simply read, "Divorce Papers." She then handed me a jewelry case with a piece of paper attached to it. The letter said that if you want to know why, watch the DVD. Mom had already taken the disc out of the case and walked over to the TV. She turned on the TV and DVD player and inserted a CD into the slot. She took the remote control and sat down on the new section I just got. Jeff feigned reluctance before quickly giving in and leading me to pick her out. Now I realized that he always gave me everything I wanted without much difficulty. Before Mom could turn on the DVD, Jim opened the door and asked, "Is everything okay?" "No, Jeff isn't here. His clothes were also gone. Looks like he left me. I'm sorry it came to this. I'll call a taxi and wait outside. I have to go home and try to repair my marriage." "I just hope I can," Jim Loren said. "I just hope I can," he said as he walked out the door. For the sake of his children, I hoped he could. After Jim left, Mom turned on the DVD. I sat down next to my mother. We saw everything he filmed during the trip. I apologized. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know how I let this happen." She gave me a look of disgust. I thought how alarmed she must be looking at my depravity. My heart sank as I thought about how my mother must have felt watching my crime. The next scene was the most terrible. I finally heard on the phone what I missed that evening. There was no video, but Jeff must have recorded his part of the conversation. Jeff said, "You spend your nights alone, don't you, Loren?" Then I heard a muffled conversation. Then Jeff asked again, "Loren, are you there? You sleep alone, right?" It was said with such venom that if I had heard it, I would have realized that he knew. Thanks to Jim, I've never heard that before. All I said was, "That's right, honey. That's true." In the next scene, a hand was seen covering the camera lens, and it became apparent that he was removing the camera from the tripod. The image on the screen moved wildly, finally stopping, looking through the sliding glass door onto the balcony. It seemed to have been placed on the table. Jeff reappeared, sat down on a chair, took the microphone apart, and began folding up the tripods, placing them in a black canvas bag. Jeff turned his head to peer into the darkness. When he turned his head back, I saw the agony on his face. He lowered his head, and for about 5 seconds I heard quiet sobs. He then seemed to pull himself together, wiping his eyes with the edge of his t-shirt. Then he spoke out loud to himself. "This is the second time she's done this to you, Jeff. This will never happen again." Then he stood up, walked towards the camera, and the screen went dark. Luckily, the show is over. He skillfully captured my infidelity for all to see. No one was more stunned than my mother, who hung her head and cried silently. No one was so sad, except me. When I saw Jeff's tears, I was overcome with self-loathing. The second time he said it, I was confused. I didn't know that he had cried because of me before. When he said it would never happen again, I was overcome with fear. Fear for what I did to my marriage. Mom asked me, "What are you going to do now? Do you want to save your marriage or run away with that guy on the street?" "Oh my God, Mom, I love Jeff. Of course I want to save my marriage. I'm not going to run away with Jim. He has a wife and 2 children. He will never leave them. Whether he can save his marriage will not be decided by him, and it will also not be your choice to save your marriage. It will depend on your husband, if you still have it. He had many days to make a decision. You already have divorce papers on your dining room table. What other things did he think of doing? If you really want to leave Jeff, you better talk to him soon and give him a good reason to take you back. I wouldn't wait too long. He already has a big head start. I dialed Jeff's cell number as soon as Mom left. He hadn't answered any of my phone calls, and I wasn't sure if he would now. I knew I had to try. Surprisingly, he answered after the second ring. There was no anger in his voice, and, amazingly, there was no emotion in it at all. "Loren, what do you want?" he asked. "Jeff, we need to talk. Will you talk to me?" "Sure, Loren. When do you want to start this conversation?" "Tomorrow. Any time you can come." "Okay, Loren, tomorrow at 2. Goodbye." Short and to the point, I thought. I didn't like the lack of emotion that I heard or didn't hear in his voice. His voice sounded so cold. It was as if he had made a decision and had no intention of changing it. He was going to end this confrontation as quickly as possible. If I had boots on, I would be shaking in them. I understood that it would not be easy. The next afternoon, I looked out the window and saw his car pull into the driveway. Instead of entering through the front door, he walked around the side of the house and entered through the back door. I ran to the kitchen and sat down at the table set for dinner. Jeff walked through the door. I think he was surprised to see me sitting there. "Hello, Jeff. Thank you for meeting with me today." He nodded his head in response. He sat down at the table, looked at the table setting, and then turned back to me with a questioning look. "I thought you might be hungry. I have lunch prepared in the refrigerator if you want to eat." He shook his head, saying, "I've already eaten," and pushed the plate away. He looked at me again, and the expression on his face screamed to me. "You wanted to talk, so talk." I started. "Jeff, I want to say, no, I need to tell you how sorry I am." Jeff seemed about to say something in response, but I cut him off. "I know what you're going to say. Sorry for getting caught, or sorry for cheating." From the expression on his face, I realized that I was right. Yes, I'm sorry I got caught, but not for the reason you might think. I regret that I even started cheating in the first place. What bothers me the most is the pain I see on your face because of my stupid actions. The realization that I caused this is tearing me apart inside. Can you forgive me, Jeff? Even if you do, I don't know if I can ever forgive myself. I waited for Jeff to speak, but he didn't say anything. I could see the pain, anger, confusion, and even love flash across his face as I waited for an answer. When he finally spoke, I was surprised by what he said. "Do you know that when I woke up in the morning, I lay in bed and watched you sleep? Or after I finished taking a shower, I would sit on a chair next to the bed and watch you?" I knew he did it. I caught him several times. Sometimes I opened one eye and asked, "What?" He smiled and laughed quietly, coming up to me and kissing me on the forehead. "You looked so peaceful laying there, even beautiful, at least to me." I would look at your face, I look at your eyes, at every curve of your face, at how your nostrils flared, how your mouth opened slightly, as if you were dreaming, perhaps, about me. Now I think maybe about him. I thought, how lucky I am to have you in my life. My guardian angel sent you to me to add color and brighten up my otherwise gray existence. You took it from me. The color and light disappeared. Now, since Wednesday, when I wake up in the morning, I still smile to myself and think how lucky I am to have you and how much I love you. Until I roll over to look for you and you're not there. Then I remember. I remember what you did, and the pain comes back. Since then, this has happened every morning. The only difference is that every morning I love you a little less, and the pain is not so strong. I realize that my mother was right. I've waited too long. Maybe if I got home on Wednesday night, I could talk to him, and maybe change something. It seems that now I'm late. He replayed what happened in his head, and the choice he made was divorce, the last thing I want. Please, Jeff, don't make a hasty choice. I know I was shit and don't deserve any attention, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to make it up to you. Give me a chance to show you that I can be the wife you deserve. Please give me a second chance. I looked at him, waiting for an answer. I saw his eyes fill with tears. Then a tear rolled down his cheek. I reached up to his face and wiped away a tear with my thumb. "I swore you wouldn't make me cry again. But now look at me," he commented sadly. "Jeff, I heard you say on the DVD that this was the second time you cried for me. When was the first time?" "Lauren, I fell in love with you when you stepped out of your dad's car. The first time I saw you. My best memories are from the summer we spent together. My worst memory is when you left me at the harvest dance. You deceived me and left me for another guy, just like this time. You left me to be ridiculed by Billy Barber and the rest of the football team. I don't know how many nights I cried in my bed where no one could see me. So you see, Monday night I cried for you for the second time. The tear that just fell seems to be for the third time. I'm sorry, Jeff. It seems like I say this too often today. This will sound stupid to you, but it was a physical pull. I will never see him again, and I will not miss him at all. All I need is for you to be by my side." "I don't know, Lauren. I saw what you did." He shook his head sadly and said, "I know I can't compete with that. I will not compete with another man. I will not compete with the memory of that other man for my wife. If we stay together, I will always be competing with his ghost, trying to measure up to your other man. You don't have to compete with anyone. You will never understand until it happens to you." Jeff shook his head sadly again and began to rise from his seat. I thought he was about to leave. I saw my marriage go up in smoke. I don't know what came over me. I jumped out of my chair, knocking it over, ran up to Jeff, and wrapped him in a bear hug that I didn't let go of. All this time I muttered, "Don't go, Jeff. Please don't leave me now." When I saw your letter at the hotel, I realized what I was doing. I realized that you and my marriage are what is important. Please forgive me and take me back. He hugged me loosely and gently stroked my hair. After a while, he put his hands on my shoulders and gently pulled me away from him so that he could look me in the eyes as he spoke to me. Whenever I thought about us in the future, I saw the two of us together. The house is surrounded by white picket fences, just like in the movies. We would have 2 sons and a girl like you that I could spoil. She would have me wrapped around her little finger, just like her mother did. I've seen us plan weddings, celebrate anniversaries, and special birthdays. I saw us grow old together and how our love sustained us through difficult times. Now I can't see anything. I have a big black hole where love used to be. I see the overwhelming darkness of life without you." He backed away, saying, "I have to go. I need to do something." "Don't go. We have so much to discuss." "No, I have to write a thank you letter." "What letter could be more important than trying to restore our marriage, and who should you write the letter to?" "Ronnie Millsap." "Why? What does he have to do with this?" "He helped me leave my cheating wife." He turned and walked out the door, whistling a tune that I later learned was "A Stranger in My House." 5 years later, my wife, asked me to drive the car to the front of the house. We were going to my parents' house for a Memorial Day party. I walked out the back door, past a newly built 10-car garage, to a bluff overlooking the beach below, across Long Island Sound, to the Connecticut coast. I no longer lived in a rented house on the coast of Nassau, but in the old town Mattoon Town. Back in the garage, I had to decide which car I wanted to take with me to my parents' house. My gaze settled on garage number 5. I clicked the remote control and stood back as the door lifted to reveal my newest acquisition. I closed the door and started the engine. I loved the sound of the powerful rebuilt Ford 390 V8 engine. As the car pulled out of the garage, I lowered the convertible top and turned into the circular driveway in front of the house. I got out of the car and turned to look at the latest object of my affection. 1961 Ford Thunderbird convertible with shiny chrome, black paint, interior and roof. God, it was beautiful. My wife opened the door and frowned. "My child and I can't drive with the top down. You'll have to pick it up." I sighed and said to Nina, "Okay, I'll put it up, but it looks a lot cooler with the top down. If you ever want me in it with the top down again, you better put it up now." My thoughts went back to the day I first took the car and we went for a drive with the top down, and Nina put her top down, and I quickly pressed the button to raise it. Nina smiled smugly. She knew how to use her amazing feminine power. I met Nina 2 months before my divorce from Lauren was final. The only thing Mr. Diamond, the bank's president, agreed on with his ex-wife was their adopted child from Romania. Although they hated each other, they both loved this little girl. The Diamonds started a charity to help Romanian orphans. I knew I was expected to participate in a $1,000 per plate fundraiser. Since I had become Mr. Diamond's favorite, I was seated at his table next to his wife. There was an empty space next to me. Before I sat down, I looked at the card on the table and it said, "Reserved for me, Kiranova." As I sat down, I nodded hello to Mr. Diamond and lightly kissed the former Mrs. Diamond on the cheek. I looked at my boss again because he had a mischievous smile on his face. It seemed like only seconds passed before this beauty in black sat down in the seat next to me. Mr. Diamond's face was beaming, and his smile never left his face as he introduced me to Janina Kiranova, Victoria's Secret lingerie models. I later learned that Nina was herself a Romanian orphan and a member of the board that ran the charity. That evening, Nina and I hit it off. We talked about our lives. She told me about her terrible life in Romanian orphanages. I think she almost brought me to tears. I wanted to hug her and protect her. She later told me that she felt my empathy, and it made her want to know more about me. Many single men this evening invited her to dance, but she refused everyone. I didn't invite her because I thought she didn't want to dance. Nina took matters into her own hands and invited me to dance. I said yes, of course. We dated for 2 years before getting married. The wedding took place at Mr. Diamond's estate in Southampton, New York. I thought his wife was a little young for him at 35 versus his 61, but he always had a smile on his face, so what do I know? We had a great first year when Nina came to me and said she wanted to have a baby. I asked her if she realized that having a baby would put her modeling career on hold for a long time. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "The only thing I want more than anything in the world is to have a child with you." A wide smile appeared on her face when she said, "Maybe more than one." I'm sure a big smile appeared on my face, and I suggested, "I think we should start trying now." We both laughed and ran into the bedroom. A year and a half later, our son Jeff Jr. was born. We got into the car after getting Jeff Jr. in the back seat. The only non-standard part on the T-Bird was the air conditioning I installed. I knew from experience that once Nina changed her clothes, she didn't want anything messing up her hair. She would rather ride a horse in 100-degree heat than have a single hair ruffled. Installing air conditioning would have made it more enjoyable for both of us. When we walked into my dad's backyard where he was grilling burgers and sausages, I was shocked to see Lauren and her mom Cheryl sitting at the table talking to my mom. Nina carried Jeff Jr. in her arms, walked over to the table, and sat down. Mom quickly took her beloved and only grandson from Nina. I approached my dad and asked, "What the hell are they doing here?" My dad said, "Speak quietly. Your mom invited them." She and Cheryl had become close since Frank died. Lauren was all alone, so your mother invited her too. You know she had a hard time getting rid of that asshole Billy Barber after you two got divorced. I knew she married Billy after I met Nina. I didn't think she was that stupid. Well, she really cheated on me with that asshole Beckman. I was sure he would have gotten a divorce. Instead, his wife took him back. She did have 2 children to worry about. It should matter. For a long time, I hired a private detective to follow him. Every time he was close to getting a good job, I would spread rumors that he was a bad worker, and he would lose. This continued until he or his wife realized that I must have had a hand in his series of failures. Jane Beckman called and asked me, point blank, if Jim's bad luck getting a job had anything to do with my revenge. Before I could respond, she told me that it not only hurt Jim, but also hurt her and her 2 children. She went on to say that she thought what he did to me was terrible, but she didn't take it out on his children. I didn't immediately tell her that I was involved, but I said that I was sure that from now on, it would be easier for him to get a job. She thanked me profusely and apologized for him ruining my marriage. I have no idea what he's doing now since I let the detective walk away, along with all the remaining hatred I had for him. It was actually a big relief to be free of the baggage I was carrying. I picked up my son from Nina and said hello to Lauren and Cheryl before walking over to the bench by the back door to the kitchen. A few moments later, Cheryl Schiavo sat down next to me and extended her arms to hug Jeff Jr. We sat quietly while she played with my 8-month-old son. Finally, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and lamented, "He should have been my grandson." I would make the best grandmother, you know that, don't you, Jeff? I looked closely at Cheryl Schiavo. She has aged over the past 5 years. I knew our divorce was hard on her. She always liked me, and she was thrilled when Lauren and I got married. I know it would be so, Mom. You were a great mom to Lauren, and I know you would have been the best grandma, too. Thank you, Jeff. I've missed you for the past 5 years. Oh, and congratulations on your promotion at the bank. Your father told me that you are now in 2nd place there. Yes, Mr. Diamond eventually resigned under a little pressure from the board of directors. They promoted Howard Goldman to the top spot, and he brought me along as executive vice president in charge of operations. Basically, if I keep my nose clean when Howard leaves, I should run for president. Jeff, Lauren wanted to talk to you, but she was afraid to approach. Can I tell her it's okay? Of course, Mom, I answered. 5 years have passed. I'm sure we can talk to each other civilly." Lauren's mom came back to the table and spoke to her. Before she could get up, Nina came up to me and said, "Be gentle with her, Jeff. She is very fragile. Don't upset her." I nodded in agreement. Nina stepped aside as Lauren approached. "Hey, Jeff, you look good." "Hey, Lauren, you too." "Nina is beautiful, Jeff, inside and out, and a good man, I can say." "Thank you. I am lucky to have two wonderful wives." "It is not true. I may have been attractive on the outside, but not so much on the inside." "It is not true. You are beautiful inside and out. You were dazzled by Jim Beckman. I'm sure it was something I did to drive you away." "This is really not true. Do you remember what I did at the dance with Billy Barber? What did you do there?" "No, it was me. There is something inside of me that spoils all the good things. Something not so beautiful. Let's change the theme. Mom told me that you got another promotion at work. I always knew you would rise to the top. Well, a lot of good things have happened to me in the last 5 years." I looked at Nina and smiled. When I turned back to Lauren, I saw that she was also looking at Nina. She turned to me and smiled too. "Jeff, there is one thing I need to clarify from that time 5 years ago. I didn't want to go there, but she brought it up. It was a telephone conversation in which I called you an idiot. I want you to know that this was the first time I called you that. To this day, I don't know why I did it. That's not why I started talking about that day. This is what I told Jim about you that day. I told him that you would become the president of the bank and how much money you would make. I realized that it sounded like I only wanted to be with you for the money. This is not at all what I had in mind. I knew you would succeed. I've always been so proud of you. I just wanted to be there when you reach your goal. This is what I wanted to share with you. It was never about the money. Please believe that it wasn't about the money. When I first heard this, I was sure it was about money. That was until I let Nina hear what you said. She was the one who suggested that I did everything wrong. She thought, judging by the expression on your face, that you weren't humiliating me and you're bragging about me to Jim. It made me feel a lot better about you. I think that's when I started to forgive. There's one more thing I have to thank you for." "What is this?" I asked. "What you did for Jane Beckman. She called me crying about what you did to Jim. She asked me to call you, but I told her that it would be better if she did it herself. I gave her your phone number at the bank. She called to tell me that Jim had finally found a job that could support them. She wanted me to thank her. I'm glad everything ended well. I never thought about her or the children. I'm glad it's over." I stood up and hugged Lauren. As we walked to the table, Lauren was crying happy tears, and Nina was smiling at me happily. We sat down at the table and had a pleasant day. On the way home that evening, we had the convertible top up, but Nina had it down. It was another wonderful day. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.